Hi, welcome to Prime Recap. After losing his parents in an accident, little Pete is adopted by a mystical dragon who takes him to live in the forest. But when he comes back into contact with civilization, the boy must protect the creature from hunters who want to capture him at any cost. Today we will recap the story of the 2016 movie, Pete's Dragon. While traveling with his family, Pete is reading a book about the adventures of a boy with his dog, Elliot, when a deer enters the road and his father must try to swerve sharply, which ends up causing an accident and overturning the car on the road. As the only survivor, Pete takes the book, puts it in his backpack, and starts walking through the trees, but is completely surrounded by a pack of wolves. With the little boy about to become a wolf's lunch, a gigantic and totally bizarre dragon arrives on the scene, scaring off the other animals and saving Pete from being devoured. Quite brave, the boy asks if the creature intends to eat him, and when he finds out that it doesn't, he names the monster Elliot, his new best friend. Feeling a special bond, the dragon allows the human to touch him and offers his paw for him to climb up, carrying Pete safely to his lair. 6 years later, a man named Mitchell claims to have seen a dragon in the forest and starts telling everyone he knows about it, but since the only people who believe him are the children, the old man takes the opportunity to add to the story by making him look like a great hero. Just as Mitchell finishes the tale, his daughter Grace appears and reassures the youngsters, saying that thanks to her job as a forest ranger, she frequents the woods practically every day, and has never seen anything even remotely resembling a dragon. After his daughter leaves, Mitchell reaffirms that the dragon is in the forest and says that he only appears to those who believe, getting the children very excited. In the forest, Pete, who is now 11 years old, finds a small rabbit and starts running after it, saving it from becoming a grizzly bear's lunch. In the background, Elliot hears the boy's screams and comes out of his lair to see what is going on, but soon realizes that everything is fine and decides to start a hide and seek with Pete, leaving his body completely invisible so that the young man can look for him. Realizing that the dragon is overpowered, the boy gives up the game and runs towards the cliff together with Elliot, being caught during the fall and flying over the forest together with his companion. After a not-so-smooth landing, the green dragon starts chasing his own tail while Pete climbs the tree that protects the lair where they live, howling at the moon as he reaches the top. With no memory of his life in civilization, Pete sits down next to Elliot and they both spend the night watching the stars, enjoying all the freedom that the woods provide them. The next morning, the duo flies through the forest until the dragon finds a felled tree and decides to pick it up to take home. However, while they are trying to pass through the forest with a piece of wood, Elliot notices Grace's presence and decides to hide, leaving his body completely invisible while Pete follows him from afar. Walking through the place, the woman spots some trees marked by lumberjacks and starts to remove the graffiti, signaling that they are not allowed to cut them down. While Grace is working on the logs, Pete sees a compass in her purse and decides to take advantage of the distraction to steal it, but makes a noise on his way back to the bushes and is almost caught in the act. At this moment, another ranger approaches saying he wants to leave and asks if Grace is finished, distracting her and saving Pete from being discovered, but before leaving, the woman takes the key from one of the backhoes and throws it into the dirt, causing the woodcutters to have to look for the object so they can start working. As soon as the guards leave, Pete goes to the road and picks up the key from the ground, handing the object and the compass to Elliot to smell, but the items are so dusty that the dragon ends up sneezing, leaving the boy's body all licked. The next morning, the two are sleeping in the den when Pete wakes up to the sound of chainsaws in the background. As he has never heard anything like this before, the young man decides to investigate and finds a group of lumberjacks cutting down trees, staying hidden to watch the humans. One of the workers goes to Gavin and asks if they got permission to collect firewood in this region, but the man just ignores him and tells him to get back to work. Soon after, Grace also arrives at the place and starts asking about Jack, her fiancé and leader of the lumberjack team, as well as being Gavin's older brother. Furious, the woman begins to fight with her boyfriend because they are working in a forbidden place, distracting the man who ends up letting his daughter go off alone into the forest. When Pete sees someone his own size for the first time, he is delighted and is discovered by Natalie, who runs after him to try to befriend him. Hiding behind a log, the boy ends up making noise and has to run, climbing the tree at a surreal speed. Even though she is surprised, Natalie continues to chase the boy and decides to try to climb like him, but she is not so skilled and ends up slipping, letting out a scream so loud that it attracts the attention of the lumberjacks. Trying to save her, Pete jumps from the branch he is leaning on and tries to pull Natalie with all his strength, but the wood gives way and they both plummet to the ground. Near the ground, Pete manages to grab onto a log and holds Natalie, slowing her fall absurdly. When they reach the ground, the girl asks Pete how old he is, and since he has no idea how old he is, he claims he is still 5. Even though she finds it strange, The girl accepts the answer and begins to introduce herself, but soon they are interrupted by Jack and the lumberjacks who arrive wanting to know what happened. Upon learning that her daughter has fallen from the tree, the leader of the workers asks what she went up there to do, and Natalie tells him about Pete, revealing the location of the boy who was hiding. Upon seeing the small Tarzan, Grace tries to reassure him and asks several questions about his family, but spots her compass on Pete's neck and ends up getting too close, causing the boy to run scared. During the escape, Pete bumps into Gavin and tries to climb one of the trees to escape, but the man pulls the boy by his shorts and knocks him to the ground, causing him to hit his head and pass out. At that moment, Elliot wakes up to the sound of the banging and starts sniffing Pete's tracks, finding the woodcutter's workstation. While listening to the conversation of the humans, Elliot hears Gavin mentioning Pete's name and decides to lean on a tree trunk to listen better, but the tree cannot support his weight and ends up falling, almost hitting the workers who notice his presence and decide to hunt him down. In the dense forest, the dragon tries to keep camouflaged while the woodcutters stop a few meters away to track its footprints, but since the creature can be invisible, they don't stand a chance of finding it. In the hospital, Pete wakes up quite confused and begins to hear the conversation between Grace and the policeman outside, but soon realizes that they have no intention of releasing him and decides to escape on his own, opening the window and escaping just as Natalie tries to enter the room. Afraid, the boy runs through the streets looking for Elliot and ends up bumping into a dog that starts barking at him, but Pete is not intimidated and barks back, growling until he makes the poor little dog retreat frightened. A few meters ahead, the boy bumps into a police car that tries to stop him, but Pete is determined to get back to Elliot and climbs on a passing school bus, hitching a ride with the vehicle full of students. From the top of the bus, Pete stares at the horizon trying to find the location of his lair, but cannot find it and decides to jump on the roof of another car, running into a dead end. With the boy cornered, Grace approaches and manages to reassure him, taking the wolf boy to the police station as soon as she can get him to stop his incessant howling. After talking to the sheriff, Jack's fiancée and daughter get in the car and start driving Pete to his house, taking responsibility for keeping him safe until everything is cleared up and his parents are located, but the boy wastes no time and tries to run for the woods as soon as the girl stops the car. Grace goes after him and manages to catch him a few yards ahead, promising that if Pete behaves, she will personally take him into the forest to see together where he lives. While the boy is introduced to his temporary family, Gavin and his men get lost in the woods and begin wandering aimlessly until they eventually find Elliot's lair. Curious, the woodcutter takes his flashlight and enters the place to investigate, finding Pete's book lying on the ground, but when he sees the object in Gavin's hand, the dragon is furious and decides to reveal itself, attacking the humans who start running desperately to the truck. As everyone climbs out, one of the lumberjacks starts the car and tries to accelerate as fast as he can, but Elliot lifts the rear of the car, preventing them from leaving the place. Desperate, Gavin reaches for his gun and aims it in the direction of the dragon, which snatches the rifle and pulls the human out by the barrel of the rifle, bending the object as if it were made of paper. With the woodcutter unarmed, Elliot stops using his invisibility and sneezes on Gavin, who only has time to get back to the vehicle before his employees speed off in desperate fear. At Grace's house, Pete begins to rediscover civilization while the ranger and sheriff try to figure out what happened to him. In their investigation, the policemen find a newspaper clipping talking about Pete's family's accident and confirm that the boy's parents are dead, requesting that a social worker come to pick him up the next morning to take him to the orphanage. In the farthest part of town, Elliot begins to sniff Pete and follows his scent until he reaches the hospital, but the boy has already left and the dragon ends up losing track of the boy. At this moment, he sees Gavin's truck passing by on the road and decides to follow it, ending up at Jack's house, where the group of woodcutters tell him about what happened and ask for help in dealing with the creature in the forest. But Natalie's father doesn't believe them and refuses to go into the woods at night, leaving her younger brother extremely frustrated. From the stairs, Grace hears Gavin's story and finally understands who the Elliot is that Pete talks so much about, and decides to go to her father's house to see if she can find out more about the dragon. When she gets there, the woman finds Mitchell and explains everything she has discovered, showing her the drawing of the creature the boy made and seeing that it matches perfectly with the traces her father had made when she was still small. Finally believing that Elliot is real, Grace asks her father to tell the story of her encounter with the dragon one last time, but now being completely sure that he is telling the truth. At Jack's house, the dragon arrives outside and hears Pete's voice, finding him seemingly happy among the humans, which makes him feel betrayed and fly toward the lair, where he spends the night extremely upset. As dawn breaks, Grace decides to take Pete to the police station, but when she sees the welfare car, the woman gives up on leaving him there and decides to keep her promise, seeking out her father so that together they can go visit Elliot's lair in the woods. At the lumber mill, Jack arrives looking for Gavin and discovers that his younger brother has taken some men and gone on a hunt. Jack receives a call from the sheriff looking for Grace and immediately assumes that she has taken the boys to visit Elliot, going straight to meet Gavin and his men who are thirsty for blood. On the other side of the forest, Pete and the others reach the end of the road and start walking to the lair, where Mitchell finally has his reunion with the dragon after almost 30 years. Upon seeing the creature, Natalie is delighted and approaches it almost hypnotized, touching the snout of the dragon that is quite fond of the girl, but at that moment, Gavin arrives with his men and they start shooting tranquilizer darts at Elliot, lassoing him by the neck and making the dragon extremely agitated. To defend his friend, Pete grabs a wooden stick and begins to beat the lumberjacks, forcing Gavin to put it on his shoulder and carry him away from the confusion. At this moment, Elliot finally decides to flee and starts climbing one of the trees, taking off into the sky, but the creature is already very weakened by the sedatives and plummets with everything, falling over the branches and knocking down the trunk that protected his lair. With the successful hunt, Gavin goes to the lumber mill where he starts showing off the dragon as if it were a trophy. From his office, Jack calls the sheriff to request all the cars in town and asks Natalie to look after Pete while he tries to talk to his brother. While Jack and Mitchell try to convince Gavin to release the dragon, Grace approaches and touches the creature, causing its fur to change color and begin to glow in an emerald green hue, leaving everyone amazed at the phenomenon. At this point, the police arrive on the scene and both Jack and Gavin leave to try to convince the officers that they are right, providing a chance for Pete and Natalie to enter the shed and manage to free Elliot, unlocking the chains. Realizing that the adults are approaching, the girl puts up a wooden beam to lock the door and tries to convince the dragon to fly, but since he is very weak, Pete suggests that he remain invisible, making Gavin and the others think that he has escaped through the skylight, except for Grace, who notices their presence and locks them inside by herself. As soon as the men leave, Pete and Natalie begin to think of a way to escape when Mitchell shows up and offers to drive the truck, serving as an escape driver for the dragon and the children. Grace's father starts the truck and speeds away, smashing through one of the walls of the shed and starting to run away in front of everyone. Desperate, Gavin orders his men to start chasing them and runs towards his truck, but Grace takes the key from his pockets and throws it away, buying Mitchell some time to distance himself. Even so, the vehicles are still chasing them and are requesting the help of some helicopters for the pursuit. Already well behind, Gavin pulls off the road and overtakes everyone across the rough terrain, passing Jack's car and getting closer and closer to the truck. Realizing that it is only a matter of time before they are caught up, Pete encourages Elliot to fly, causing the dragon to try to get up and then plummet to the ground, but the jolt knocks the brake cable out of place, causing a bunch of hydraulic fluid to leak down the track. Getting closer and closer to the dragon, Gavin passes the truck and positions his truck to block the bridge, hoping that Mitchell will brake when he sees that there is nowhere to pass, but thanks to the broken cable, the man cannot slow down and decides to do just the opposite, stepping deep and forcing the lumberjacks to jump so as not to be hit. Upon impact, the truck decelerates until it stops running, but since the cops are still behind them, Elliot climbs onto the bridge structure and blows a jet of flame that forces everyone to stop, causing the vehicles to jam and the asphalt to start caving in. As it is a little further on, Jack and Grace's truck is hit by fire and begins to collapse along with the bridge, forcing Pete to climb the structure to convince his companion to stop, saying that the humans are now his new family. Gavin gets out of the car and does everything he can to keep his brother and sister-in-law from falling into the river, but the vehicle is too heavy and he cannot stop them. At that moment, Elliot jumps off the structure and manages to secure the truck, allowing Jack and Grace to get into the back, but just as the couple is about to leave, the bridge gives way and falls toward the river, taking the dragon and the humans along with it. Apprehensive, Mitchell and the others watch the abyss thinking they are gone, but a few seconds later, Elliot emerges from the depths carrying Jack and Grace on his back, leaving everyone relieved. On the other side of the bridge, Gavin realizes he was wrong and decides to leave the dragon alone, but police helicopters appear on the horizon and Pete decides that the best option is to leave, riding on Elliot's back and setting off with him into the forest. After a long flight, the dragon arrives at his old lair and tries to convince the boy to stay there, but Pete says that everyone knows about this location and advises Elliot to look for a new home in the north, where Natalie said it was the land of dragons. As a way of saying goodbye, the boy reads the book he received from his parents for the last time and spends the night cuddling with his dragon friend, leaving to meet Grace and the rest of his new family the next morning. After that day, no one in town has ever seen the creature again, but in secret, Jack and Grace travel north, visiting Elliot and his new dragon family whenever they can. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.